Are you the bottleneck in your own business? On this week's Profit with a Plan, I sit down with Eric Williams, founder of Willity and a master leadership transformation and business systems. After guiding over 300 entrepreneurs and managing over 1,000 employees, Eric shares his proven strategies to help overwhelmed leaders break free of the daily grind. You know it. So, if you're constantly solving that same problem, stuck doing the task you know that should be delegated, or you feel like stepping away from your business would just make it collapse, this is the episode that has a blueprint for freedom. So, in this episode, your owners, if you've done all the things and you're ready to build a business that finally works for you, then watch out for this episode. Hey, entrepreneurs, are you working too hard for too little profit? Well, welcome to Profit with a Plan podcast, where we help you scale smarter, increase profitability, and build a business that's worth more, whether you keep it or you sell it. I'm Marcia Riner, business growth strategist and profit booster behind Infinite Profit. I've helped countless entrepreneurs to turn their businesses into highly profitable and sale-ready assets, so they enjoy more money now and a bigger payout later on. So join me for practical strategies, expert insights, and proven steps to make your business more profitable, more valuable, and built to last. By the way, today's episode is sponsored by Infinite Profit, where we don't just talk profit, we deliver it. But before we dive in, I wanted to share something special with you. What if you could have your entire marketing system run smarter, faster, and simpler starting today? The Profit Booster Marketing Hub is built for busy business owners who want better leads, smarter operations, and more sales without hiring a team or learning complicated tech. For a limited time, you can get a free 30-day trial and try out the full suite at profitbooster.biz. You'll finally have one place to attract and convert more prospects, stay consistent with your social media and email marketing, automate follow-ups without sounding robotic, book more appointments directly into your calendar, and stop duct taping tools together. So if you've been waiting for an easier way to market your business, this is it. Go claim your free trial at profitbooster.biz. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Our guest today is Eric Williams, founder and chief business transformation officer at Willity. After 20 years leading teams, hiring, training, and managing over 1,000 employees, he also did advising for 300 entrepreneurs, managers, and executives. He started Willity to help overwhelmed leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs to get their business and, more importantly, their lives back on track by focusing on three key areas. That's the mechanics of their schedule and work, their leadership skill sets, and honing their identity and personal superpowers as leaders. He takes leaders and businesses through a process of eliminating, batching, systemizing, delegating, and automating to streamline their operations, time, and impact. Welcome to Profit with a Plan, Eric. I'm excited to have you on today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This is my favorite subject, so
All
looking
right.
forward to talking about it.
Don't we love just getting in our own geekiness and doing all this?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you fall into processes? What pulled the love in for you?
Yeah, this was something that as I was continuing through my career, my work, my business, one of the things that I realized over many years was that my special skill set is around the operations, the kind of implementer operational support for visionary founders, leaders, entrepreneurs. So as much as I would like to be, that's not the visionary part is not my strong suit, something that's where I flex into. But I love working on the process, building systems, building out teams, figuring out how to support people in a meaningful way, not just building teams to build, cogs in a machine, but how do you support
Mm.
them? How do you get the best out of them? How do you structure the environment and the check-ins and the accountability processes to really help them do their best work, be able to support them to be able to grow the business, the outcomes that you're looking to get. And so that was really something that I've been passionate about throughout my career and my work, is just building those things. I like to do the building. I'm a builder, and so that's getting all of those systems in place to run efficiently, and not always overbuilding, but just building kind of what's the acceptable level to get this outcome, what's really going to drive the needle to getting these things done.
Well, I think it's an important part of every business. And I think that's the part that kind of gets looked at later in their growth phases for companies. I found that if you do this earlier and you create systems and processes on repeatable tasks, and hey, business owners, like 90% of your business should be repeatable tasks. Wash, rinse, repeat. It makes scaling and growth and hiring and everything so much easier. But I feel like many business owners, they get going, they're busy swinging the hammer, putting out fires and chasing customers, that they forget that it could be a whole lot easier if they just kind of created these systems that are duplicatable by others, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And that's,
Go ahead.
sorry, did you have a
No,
question?
I was just
Okay.
going to say,
Yeah.
that's where I think they fail miserably.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And that's what I see in all the entrepreneurs I talk with. Some are able to do it quite well. And I think the ones you see effortlessly transitioning into a business that grows and scales, it's skills that they've built or practices that they put in place where they are doing it without thinking. It's just part of
Mm,
their mode of operating. And so they don't necessarily recognize that it's needed because they just do it. They do it
mm.
that way. They figure out, the leading edge problem. They find a solution. They hand it off to someone else. Say, here's what I figured out so far. This will get us 80-90% of the way through systematizing this part of the business. Go and do it. Like, I'm going to hire someone to come in and handle that part of the business. But a lot of folks, when you're getting started, one of the warnings that I have is to not overbuild your business or overplan on the front end. It's really something you need to do and ladder up over time. Because if you build out, what the business looks like at 100, let's say you're starting out just a founder solo still, if you build out what this business is going to look like at 100 employees and really go into that level of detail, that about who's going to talk to who, what do those operations look like, that's not where you need to be spending your time when you're just getting started, when you just have yourself, a small team. But you do need to do this incrementally or at specific points in your growth phase. And it's usually when your current systems are starting to max out, where you're finding yourself starting to take back on things that maybe you've delegated in the past, or there's
Mm.
too many new clients coming in, or too much client work that you have to have your hands in. Those kind of warning signs are really the things that should tell you, despite feeling like you need to go do the work because the work needs to get done right at that moment, you should listen to your body, listen to what your mind's telling you about when you're starting to get pulled in that direction. That's actually when you need to pull back and figure out what the delegation looks like, what the automation, what the systems look like to do that at the next level. So that's one of those central tensions in the growth phase of I recognizing when you need to be there and do it early enough that you still have time and bandwidth, and not so late where you're already working 80, 100 hours a week because you thought it was just a busy week or a busy month and it turned into months of that. It's
Yes.
hard to get out of that. But when you have that busy, 50-hour week, 60-hour week, or something in that direction, those kind of weeks should tell you, hey, is this something that's likely to continue? Let me solve it now, because it's only going to get worse as you grow, especially if you're finding success.
That is brilliant. Saying, okay, here's the red flag, right? I'm working more than I did last month. I may have more clients or whatever it is, but this thing could be automated or systemized in a way that I can, like you said, delegate and hand off, or I can, even delegate, hand off to, the new AI versions of things going on. But if you can't get it out of your head onto a piece of paper or onto a document, then you're just gonna keep chasing, your time going forward. And I think that those red flags, and would you mind repeating them because they were really important? These are red flags that will tell you it's time to put a system for that in place.
Yeah. There, I think in the context of what I just shared, the red flag was around your time, but that's not, I was reflecting on that after I said it, that when you hit 50, 60 hours, it's assuming you're working 40 or that you want to, or that's where you are, and that
Right.
you're, not wanting to work 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week, and it's starting to stretch farther. But it's really recognizing, and I'm not saying that your business is always consistent, that there's never push phases, that that's part of being a business owner. There's always ups and downs. However, the red flag to be aware of is when you have consistent busy weeks, when you are trying to use the excuse, oh, this is just a tough week, next week will be better. You get to next week, it's still busy. You get to the following week, it's still busy, right?
Right.
I'm sure you've been in those positions. I've been in those positions. A lot of my clients have been in those positions. And that's where you start to get into a tough cycle where you are working because you need, your business is growing, you have more demand. And and so you want to, it's an exciting thing that things are growing and that you need to put more time into it. So there's some mental things to deconstruct here about, yes, exciting, but you also need to solve it with your systems, your automation, so that you don't get trapped in this cycle where you're overworking yourself, you're getting worn out. That means the following week, maybe you're not operating at 100% capacity. Maybe your capacity goes down to 90% or 80%, which means you have to work longer that week, which means maybe you're getting less sleep, which means the following day, the
Are
following
you
week.
describing my week all over
Yeah.
again? Stop it.
Yeah.
You're making me think that, oh my goodness, I needed to have that system in place.
Yeah.
But this is crazy because you had you were in flow when you were talking about it earlier, and I didn't write it down fast enough, but you had said a couple 3 points before the time point about, oh, well, if this happens, that's when you want to look at it. And I think it was something along the lines of, when you start to see that repeated document or that repeated thing that you were
Oh, yeah.
doing that triggers you to go, hey, maybe I can have somebody else do this. But here or there, we'll play back and make sure we put it into the important parts of the podcast notes on that. But I
Yeah.
think that that's really awareness is the
Yeah.
first step that we need to have when we're looking at, oh, how can we do this better, right? We're building a mousetrap. If we can do it better, faster, stronger, cheaper, right? Then we can be more profitable in our business and start to have the freedom that
Yeah.
we all required or requested when we, raised our hand and said we wanted to be business owners.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And I can definitely speak to that about some of the other ways that this shows up is anything. So maybe I'll phrase it somewhat differently. If you're doing the same thing multiple times, especially if it feels like you're reinventing the wheel multiple times for what should be a process that is fairly straightforward, that's when you need to start documenting it. And documenting doesn't have to be like a big binder of SOPs. It could be a recorded video. It could
mm,
be doing some voice chat in AI to summarize into, hey, here's how you do it. You can also delegate to yourself. We're talking about saving mental time and energy as you're growing your business. And if you're doing something once a month, it's easy to forget given the hundreds of other things you have to do between the first of the month of this month, first of the month of the next month. You have to do it regularly, but it takes your brain a long time to get back into that. What do I need to do? What's the step here? Where do I have to go in the software? And so if you do it once, you can essentially train yourself or train someone else. But that's sort of how we want to think about the nuts and bolts of your day is
love it.
what can you delegate to yourself, future, or to someone else? What is it about this process that I can take and walk through? You may have it ingrained in yourself. It may feel like intuition, but it really is a combination of your decision making, your upbringing, your educational background, your work background. All of those things feed into the shorthand that your brain and body just kind of execute this way. It feels like
Natural.
intuition, but it's something you define. And that's when you mentioned about what can get delegated or how difficult it is for people to figure out what to delegate. Communication is such a fundamental thing about leadership, leading a business, growing your business. And we say that, but what does that mean? What does it mean in the sense of delegation? What does it mean in the sense of building your team? Being able to scope out a project, being able to define here's where you have flexibility to make decisions.
Mm.
Here's where you don't. Here, the places you don't is because I've spent time figuring out this is how to get this great outcome repeatedly. You have to do it specifically this way, this way, this way. But there's some flexibility there where you can kind of, whoever's you're delegating to can have their own nuance, their own approach. And so that's the sort of thing that you want to think through as you're working uh, on as you're working. Think about what mental steps am I going through this process? Why did I make a decision about this potential client, the follow up with this potential client this way versus doing it this way for this other client? These things you can start to define because you can start to get it out of your head and create systems and guides about how this work is done. That's the stuff that really frustrates people when they're trying to delegate is not having that, whoever you're delegating to doesn't have your background. They don't have your education. They might have different kind of lens that they're looking at the world through. And that's fine. And it's great to have with diverse ones and experiences. However, you need to define where the process needs to be done exactly this way versus that. And usually it's easier that while you're in there, while you're doing the work, to be able to reflect, but you do need to put in some additional time to actually go in and do that work. It's kind of the deeper mental work about how I'm decisions as opposed to just doing it off of intuition.
Ah, you know what? That is a common problem that people do. They'll come in and they'll go, okay, well, just do it, right? And here's the task, go do it, right? Or
Mhm.
they'll over document the whole thing. And yeah, so you pick up the phone, you dial one first, you dial eight, and so they never seem to put a framework together, is what I'm hearing out of this story, that I think is really helpful when you're setting these procedures or policies up, as if you have this framework. And I love how you said you've got a little bit of freedom or flexibility in this area of it, where the task, the person that's doing the task can now add their own flair into it, or come up with something creative to make it, better, faster, stronger, less expensive, on their mind. But I think that's the piece that's missing, because I have to say, as a business owner, you're like, oh my God, it's easier if I just do it rather than having to explain it and tell you and have you do it. So getting this out of your head and kind of that framework of going, okay, if I'm going to do this, how can I do it easier? And as an example, and maybe you can talk to this a little bit, is one of my clients is handling one-on-one relationships with her customers. And she thinks that it's got to be, you know, specialized and personalized, and everybody's different. And I'm like, no, not really. You're doing a standard framework. They may have a different problem you're working on, but chances are you're doing most of the stuff systemized.
Mhm.
So, how do you get them to start thinking that what they're doing is a system? Are your podcast guest appearances leading to real business, or are you just hoping that listeners will take action? With the Profit Booster Podcast Monetization Hub, we turn your interviews into lead generating machines so that you capture, nurture, and convert listeners into paying clients. So stop leaving money on the table and get started today at profitboosterpod.com.
Yeah, that requires some backing up on what they're actually doing, and that's why we go through a process of an analysis of what's going on in their day-to-day schedule and
Mm.
really understand what needs to be done with it, because that's where you start to see the patterns. Things start to become familiar in that case. And so I think in the context of like your delivery of client work, right? Because it may feel like there's an intense amount of things to customize, but it could be that you're actually only customizing 10% of it, and that the rest of it could be in templates and in guides, or even just like it gets customized here, it gets customized here, it gets customized here, but by and large we're delivering this, or should be. And so I think the interesting point here about where people get, I think, hung up on the kind of custom or unique or applying something new to each and every client is that's tough. And if you want to have a company that's like that, that's fine. If you
Exactly.
want every project to be new and novel, some people really thrive on that. That's fine. If you want to have a business that's just you or maybe you and a couple people, that's also fine. Like there's no judgment attached to where you want your
Sure.
business to be. But if you are hitting these boundaries where you really need or want some more revenue in the door, more profit in your business, more time, then you need to figure out how to do this. And one of the
Mhm.
things I think flipping the narrative about what it means to systematize your business and your delivery of work for your clients is that you're trying to replicate the genius, the intelligence that you're bringing to the problem, the solutions that you figured out, your commitment to excellence for your clients. You're figuring out how to deliver that repeatedly and to more
Mhm.
people. And so you're delivering more value to more people by doing it systematically. It's another way to think about it is if you do it a different way every time, then what are the odds that you're going to make a mistake? That one of the things that you do differently that particular time is actually going to be counterproductive to the whole thing you're doing with
Mm.
your clients. And so that's why I like to challenge folks that I work with around how they're defining what that delivery service product delivery is for their clients and what can be systematic about it, what can be predictable about it, how do they replicate what they're bringing to the table in a way that allows them to deliver that value repeatedly and consistently, right?
That
Repeatedly,
that's
consistently, and at a high quality level.
That's right on point because I deal a lot with the legal space and attorneys as well. And they always like, well, they're buying my brain. And I'm like, no, you still have processes that are there. You still have systems that you do the same thing. It's just the problem that they got in may not be the same, right? You still have the same challenges and roles, and like you said, 80 or 90% of it could be repeatable, right? And then the little piece on that. And I think when we look at businesses too that tend to serve too many industries or too many products or try and do the pellet gun firing squad on their marketing and going out to everybody, that if they narrow in to the main problem that they solve, and create some systems and processes behind that first, I think that makes their business easier to run as well.
Yeah.
And then they can expand out to replicate other lanes or pillars or avenues that they can go on. But I think having this conversation on the value of processes is, I mean, it's essential for running your business, whatever business it is, manufacturing to customer service to legal to, coaching or whatever it is. They're all processes,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah. Yeah. You're going to rise to the level of your systems in your business. And
Mm.
that's it. And again, it could be one, solo, could be one person, it could be a larger team. And some people hit this at 50 employees. Some people hit this at 100 employees
Really?
where they have been able to grow to a certain point, but then can't extricate themselves from things at a different level. And that's why I said this is a skill you need to build, but also something you need to reflect on
All
regularly.
the
It's not
time.
something you need to think about every single day. I actually have an argument to make about how you can think about it every single day, but when it's about creating these increments in your business in the growth where you can take a breath, you can take a look back, you can reorganize your business of what it needs to get to the next level. And sometimes it's going to be every 6 months, sometimes it's going to be every couple of years where you really need to go through this, deeper reorganization and get yourself out of the habit of workaholic work. If you tend to grab the kind of nuts and bolts kind of responsibilities, if you just have that habit but don't want to have that habit, that's where you'd want to put in these incremental times you and assess what's going on and kind of do a full look back at what you can get off the plate.
Yeah, that's really important for those business owners that got into business thinking that they're going to have, more money and more free time when in fact they're working longer hours and getting paid less because they're doing work that they probably shouldn't be doing based on their skill set, right? And so by setting these systems up, you can actually, as we said in the intro, like take a vacation and not have your phone, glued to you because you're the blockage in the funnel or in the system, that your team now knows exactly what to do and can execute it on your behalf, right? Which is,
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah.
a dream of a business. You can
Yeah.
then be the leader, not the doer.
Yeah. And that's why when I get back to the delegation piece, because remember when I talked about like, here's where you have flexibility, but here's the rule. Here's the rules. Here's the rule book. Here's the framework for making decisions. As long as you can trust someone to execute that, which is a different bucket, but people that you shouldn't hire anybody that you can't trust. That's a short version I wanted to asterisk, but you have the rules, you have the framework, and you've trained them on it. They have like this is how you make the decisions. You should be able to trust that person to execute because
Mm,
you've given them the boundaries. Here's what you can do, here's what you can't do, here's how you deliver this. This is the order that this gets delivered, and therefore when you walk away, that's when someone should be able to they should have enough information, enough context, enough of the framework, enough of the boundaries to be able to go on and execute that. And that's how you get it fully off your plate. And it's not to say you don't do that periodic analysis, that you don't have reports back,
yeah.
whether it's weekly or monthly or whatever, but that gives you the visibility of, is this person executing within the framework I gave them, within the boundaries, and executing this along those lines. Because then it's very easy also to manage that person and say, hey, here's where it went off the rails. Like it's this step. It's
Exactly.
not just that the project went badly. It's that if you have that outline, if you have that process, you can really deep dive with that person on your team and say, like, where did this go wrong? Either you didn't listen or the process was wrong, right? Like you can take ownership as the employer and the business owner to say, hey, I didn't explain this well. Like you executed along the lines of the guidelines I gave, but the guidelines weren't right, right? So, but you can go in and troubleshoot, but that's how you continue to optimize and change. And it means that if you find a place in that process, you can tweak and change it.
Yeah.
You don't need to go back to the drawing board and rewrite the whole process. You know exactly where something is getting where it's
Where the
rubbing
ball's
too
been
much.
dropped.
Yeah, where the ball's been dropped or where there's an opportunity to improve the process.
Yeah.
You don't need to touch the whole thing. You just need to narrow in on here. There's a better way to do this particular part.
And I think these are great tools for when you're building processes from scratch. But
Mhm.
even when you're already a flowing business and you've got somebody in a role that's already doing the job, you can always engage the employee to help you create the process that they're going through. Or if they're a relatively new employee, how did you do it at company A now that you're here at company B?
Yeah,
Do you have any input? This is the way I do it. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's actually really helpful and encouraging to the employee to be asked what their thoughts and opinions are, but it can also give you some insights as a business on how to improve it and make it better.
yeah. Yeah, but you need a place to start, with
Exactly.
you need to have something written down, something
Somewhere.
articulated so that if you're going to make improvements, right? Because I'm all about having great, good flow of communication between people on the team. And I think the boundaries are an important part of that because then they know what's inbounds, what's not inbounds. And when you're looking at that process to improve, right? The person who's actually doing the work could find and propose, here we could do this part of it differently. But if it's just kind of amorphous and not defined, it's really hard to
Exactly.
propose changes and make meaningful changes moving forward.
I love it. I love it. So this is a really fun topic for me, and I know I can see you're completely passionate about it, and you know this stuff, and this is like you said, you like to take things apart and put them back together again. Um, but it's like every business needs to have these, whether it's the customer journey that they go through, the marketing process they go through, the sales process they go through, the delivery of the product that they go through, their accounting. I mean, every division or job in a company needs to have processes. And I think, like you said, if you just incrementally chip away at writing down what it is that you do, even if you lost that employee and you had to hire another one, now you have the exact thing that the first employee was doing, so that the new employee can step right in and start doing the same thing. It's just, to me, it boggles my mind that businesses don't do the processes or don't get it on paper, or worse, they spend a lot of money getting it on paper and then never follow it. But it's like, I mean, that's a whole nother story down the path. But I mean, these are really important pieces to running a real business, and having those in place earlier rather than later, I think is what's going to do it, besides the fact that it means value to the bottom line.
Yeah. 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 And that's how having these, knowing exactly where the levers are, right? I think this is, in this conversation, just the analogy I'm going back to is where you can tweak and change in your whole process. But that's where you can start to identify where's the drag, where are we spending too much time, where's the drag on, we're spending too much money on this, the expenses are high. But if you don't have that outlined, it's really hard to say. You might just be looking at, total dollar of expenses, total revenue, and just not know what to do with it, or
Exactly.
how to go about fixing it, where it needs to be fixed. Because you could also find that there's a cash drain in this process once you have this outlined, and then you can figure out it's not about fixing the whole process, it's about fixing it right where it needs to be.
Mm.
And then when you think about selling the business too, who wants to buy a business that has no guide, no rule books, no process plan, right? Because if you're trying, whether if you're trying to buy a business, or and so then flip this to, if you're going to sell it, if you're looking to buy a business, if that person who's the business owner operator is gone and taking the whole business operations in their head with them, you're not going to want to invest very much in that business, because there's a
If at all.
high, even if the financials are good now, there's a high risk. It could, if you can figure it out, fine. If you're thinking about selling the business, in place, it makes the business valuable to a potential person to come in and run it, because they exactly the playbook to run the business.
Yeah, geez. All right, Eric, I know we can go on and on and on about this, because there's so many reasons you want to have the systems in place, and then how do you do them properly, and then what's the benefit for them? Processes are just essential for everything you do and in your company, and it would be better to have them documented and moving, because then you can make better decisions as well. But like I said, we can go on about this for a long time on it, but where can listeners find out more about you and your company, and how they can start to improve their processes?
Yeah, the best place to start is on my website, willity.com. We have a class that really outlines the big three red flags that you should be looking out for in your business, as a four-step plan to really get your business streamlined and automated. What do you need to do to actually make that happen, put that in place? So that's at willity.com/watch. That's really the best place to get started. Anybody who watches that, I'm happy to hop on the phone and just troubleshoot their business, where they're at, see if they need help. Happy to talk about what that looks like. And if not, happy to provide suggestions and help get them on their way.
Awesome. Awesome. Great idea. Great place to get started, and looking at your processes to improve them and make them a little bit stronger. So thanks. We appreciate the opportunity to do the video and the training, and looking for those three red flags. So that was such a brilliant start on this, to talk about the warning flags that say you need to have a process, or you need to fix your process. So good point on that. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in today. I hope you picked up some valuable insights and actionable ideas that will help you make your business more profitable. And if you're ready to simplify your marketing and start getting better results, go grab your free 30-day trial of the Profit Booster Marketing Hub. No tech headaches, just smart, streamlined marketing that works. Head over to profitbooster.biz and get started today. And don't forget to subscribe. You don't want to miss future shows. You can always catch Profit with a Plan on any of your favorite podcast players, and looking forward to more great profitable information on next week's show. So until then, make your plans and profit with them. Thank you so much, Eric. We appreciate you being on the show today.
Great. Thank you so much. Glad to